So, good afternoon, everyone. I will be continuing our Android Kotlin Basics course. So, we have completed part 1, part 2, and part 3 till now, and I will be completing part 4 of Unit 1. Let me share my screen. So, is my screen visible?
Yes, Jan, it is.
Okay, so the part 4 contains on adding a button to our app. So we will learn how to use classes, objects, and conditionals to create an interactive app for user. So there are uh, seven, eight steps in this. So first we will learn how to create a Kotlin program that generates random number to simulate rolling dice. We will open code lab. Yes. So our final output will be like this, and what we will learn is how to programmatically generate random number to simulate dice roll, how to structure your code by creating dice class with a variable and a method, and how to create an object instance of a class, modify its variable, and call its method. And you will build a Kotlin program in a browser-based Kotlin programming tool that can perform a random dice roll. So you can open your this playground, Kotlin playground in a new window. So now let's create a function for uh, random generation of numbers. So first we will have our function main starter code. Then we will create a function for random numbers. So to roll a dice, you need a way to represent all the valid dice rollovers. For a regular six-sided dice, the acceptable dice rolls are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have previously learned that there are types of data like integer for integer number and string for text. So int range is another data type, and it represents a range of integer number from a starting point to an end point. An int range is a suitable data type for representing the possible value a dice roll can produce. So inside your main function, define a variable as a val called dice range. Assign it to a int range from 1 to 6, representing the range of integer number that six-sided dice can roll. So this is what we have to assign. So you can tell that uh, this range is a Kotlin range because it has a start number, two dots followed by an ending number, no space between. Other example of integer ranges are 2 dot dot 5 for the number 2 through 5 and 100 dot dot 200 for the numbers 100 through 200. So let's take a look at this step. Notice that it does not say int range in the definition. In the same way, you did not have to specify int or string when creating a variable or an integer or a string. Most of the time, the system can figure out what data type you intend. For example, the system interprets this well dice range is 1.6 dot dot 6 as this. So automatically it will figure out that it's a range between 1 to 6 through 1 to 6. So similar how calling println tells the system to print the given text, you can use function called random to generate and return a random number for you for a given range. As before, as you can store the result in a variable. So like println, you can use the function random to generate a random number. Inside main, define a variable as a val called random number. Make random number have the value of the result of calling random on the dice range as shown below. Okay. So we will create a value random number, and we will give it dice range dot random. Notice that you are calling random on dice change using a period or dot between the variable and the function call. You can read this as generating a random number from dice range. The result is then stored in the random number variable. To see your randomly generated number, use the string formatting notation, also called a string template random number, to print as shown below. So we can use this to uh, print the randomly generated number. So here is the function. I will just show you. So here we have taken a range dice range from 1 to 6, and then we have created a function random number where we will generate a random number through 1 through 6, and then print the random number which is generated. So here is the output, and the random number generated is 5. Again, if we run the app, we will get another random number C. So we got random number 3. Run your code several times. Each time you should see output as below with different random number. Okay, let's go to the next part. So now we will create a class for dice class. While you roll dice, they are real objects in your hand, while the code you just wrote works perfectly fine. It's hard to imagine that it's about actual dice. Organizing a program to be more like the things it represents makes it easier to understand. So it would be cool to have programmatic dice that you can roll. All dice work essentially the same. They have the same properties such as sides, and they have the same behavior such as they can be rolled in Kotlin. You can create a programmatic blueprint of a dice that says that dice have sides and can roll a random number. This blueprint is called a class. From that class, you can then create actual dice objects called object instances. For example, you can create a 12-sided dice or a 4-sided dice. Let's take a look at the tip. Class is similar to how an architect's blueprint plans are not the house. They are instructions of how to build the house. The house is the actual thing or object instance created according to the blueprint. So now let's begin by defining a dice class. In the following step, you will define a new class called dice to represent our rollable dice. So let's clear out our old code. Hmm. Below this main function, add a blank line and then add a code to create the dice class as shown below. Start with a keyword class followed by the name of the class followed by an opening closing curly braces. So we will just copy this and give a line and then paste this. So similar to using the function keyword in Kotlin to create a new function, use the class keyword to create a new class. So to create function, we use fun, and for creating a new class, we will use class keyword. You can choose any name for a class, but it is helpful if the name indicates what the class represents by convention. The class name is written in upper camel case, also called Pascal casing. For example, car, parking meter, customer record are all valid class names, and you can guess at what they represent. So you can choose any name here, like I've given dice. You can make it cube, but it is suitable that if you choose the convention. So inside a class definition, you can specify one or more properties for the class using variables. Real dice can have a number of sides, a color, or a weight. In this task, you will focus on the property of numbers of side of the dice. Inside the dice class, add a variable called sides for the number of sides your dice will have. So we will add a variable called sides, and will mention the number of sides we want in the dice. So that's it. You now have created a very simple class representing dice. Create an instance of the dice class. With this dice class, you have a blueprint of what a dice is. To have an actual dice in your program, you need to create dice object instance. And if you needed to have three dice, you would create three object instances. Okay, so dice. So like we want, if we want three dices, we have to create three instances for the dice. Now let's see. To create an object instance of the dice in the main function, create a val called my first dice and initialize it as an instance of the dice class. Notice the parentheses after the class name, which denote that you are creating a new object instance from the class. Now that you have my first dice object, a thing made from the blueprint, you can access its properties. The only property of dice is its size. You access a property using the dot notation. So to access the side property of my first dice, you call my first dice dot sides, which is pronounced my first dice dot sides. Below the declaration of my first dice, add a println statement to output the number of sides of my first dice. Your code should look like this. So we will just copy paste it. And if we run, so we will get our output as the number of dices of my first dice, which is 6. You now have a dice class and an actual dice, my first dice with 6 dice sides. Let's make them dice roll. You previously used a function to perform the action of printing cake layers. Rolling dice is also an action that can be implemented as a function, and since all dice can be rolled, you can add a function for it inside the dice class. A function that is defined inside a class is called a method. In the dice class, below the sides variable, insert a blank line and then create a new function for rolling dice. Start with Kotlin keyword fun, followed by the name of the method, followed by the parentheses, followed by opening and closing curly braces. You can leave a blank line in between the curly braces to make room for more code as shown below. Your class should look like this. So we will add another function inside the dice class. So you can name this method anything you want, but it is helpful to give it a name that indicates what action it performs. The naming convention for function and method is to start with the lowercase letter. Use camel case and start with an action verb if possible. So when you roll a sided dice, it produces a random number between 1 and 6. Inside the roll method, create a val random, assign it a random number in the 1 through 6 range. Use the dot notation to call random on the range. So after generating the random number, print it to console. You finished roll method should look like the code below. Now inside the roll function, we will add a random number value, and we will print that random number. To actually roll my first dice in main, call the roll method on my first dice. You call a method using dot notation. So to call the roll method of my first dice, you type my first dice dot roll, which is pronounced my first dice dot roll. So the completed code will look like this. So if we run the code, you should see the result. So first we have the my first dice dot sides, which is 6, and then the random number which is generated 2. Once more we'll see. So again, The sides are 6 and the random number which is generated is 1. So congratulations, you have defined the dice class with a sides variable and role function. In the main function, you created a new dice object instance and then you called the role method on it to produce a random number. Return your dice roll value. Currently, you are printing out the value of the random in your role function and that works great. But sometimes it's more useful to return the result of a function to whatever called the function. For example, you could assign the result of the role method to a variable and then move a player by that amount. Let's see how that's done. In the main, modify the line that says my first dice dot roll. Create a val called dice roll. Set it equal to value returned by the roll method. This doesn't do anything yet because roll doesn't return anything. In order to for this code to work as intended, roll has to return something. In previous code lab, you learned that you need to specify a data type for input arguments to function. In the same way, you have to specify a data type for data that a function returns. Change the roll function to specify what type of data will be returned. In this case, the random number is an integer, so the return type is integer. The syntax for specifying the return type is after the name of the function, after the parenthesis, add a colon, space, and then the integer keyword for the return type of function. The function definition should look like the code below. So this is how it should look like. Run this code and you will see an error. A return expression required in a function with a black block body. You change the function definition to return an integer, but the system is complaining that your code doesn't actually return an int. Block body or function body refers to the code between the curly braces of a function. You can fix this error by returning a value from a function using return statement at the end of the function body. In roll, remove the println statement and replace it with a return statement for random number. Your role function should look like the code below. So it should look like this. In main, remove the print statement for the sides of the dice. Add a statement to print out the value of sides and dice roll in an informative sentence. Your finished main function should look like similar to the code below. So the main function should look like this. Run your code and your output should be like this. Your six-sided dice rolled 4, and here is all your code so far. So we will just copy paste it and run it. So this is our output, and see, we if we run it again, we will get a random number like your six-sided dice rolled 3. Now change the number of sides on your dice. Not all dice have 6 sides. Dice come in all shapes and size. 4 sides, 8 sides, up to 120 sides. In your dice class, in your roll method, change the hard-coded 1 6 to use sides instead, so that the range and thus the random number rolled will always be right for the number of sides. In the main function, below and after printing the dice roll, change sides of my first dice to be set to 20. So let's change the markers. We'll change it later. Copy and paste the existing print statement below after where you change the number of sides. Replace the printing of dice roll with printing the result of calling the roll method on my first dice. Okay, so your program should look like this. We will copy paste it. So now we will run the program. Okay, so there are two dices. First, the your six. I mean, we have entered two types of dice, like six-sided dice, and it is rolled. So the random number generated will be three, and one is the 20-sided dice. When it is rolled, the random generated number is 10. So now let's customize your dice. The idea of a class is to represent a thing, often something physical in the real world. In this case, a dice class does not represent a physical dice. In the real world, dice cannot change the number of sides. If you want a different number of sides, you need to get a different dice. Programmatically, this means that instead of changing the sides, the property of an existing dice object instance, you should create a new dice object instance with the number of sides you need. In this task, you are going to modify the dice class so that you can specify the number of sides when you create a new instance. Change the dice class definition so you can supply the number of sides. This is similar to how a function can accept arguments for input. Modify the dice class definition to accept an integer called num sides. The code inside your class does not change. Inside the dice class, delete the sides variable as you can now use num sides. Also fix the range to use num sides. Hmm. If you run this code, you will see a lot of error because you need to update main to work with the changes to the dice class. In main, to create my facilitator, you must now supply in the number of sides as an argument to the dice class as shown below. In the print statement, change sides to num sides. Below that, delete the code that changes sides to 20 because that variable does not exist anymore. Delete the println statement underneath as well. Your main function should look like the code below, and if you run it, there should be no errors. After printing the first dice roll, add code to create and print a second dice object called my second dice with 20 sides. Add a print statement that rolls and prints the number value. And this is how our finished code will look like. So your six-sided dice rolled 2 and your 20-sided dice rolled 10. Again, if we run this, the six-sided dice rolled 1 and 20-sided dice rolled 10. So now let's go to the next part. So now adopt good coding practice. When writing code, concise is better. You can get rid of the random number variable and return the random number directly. Change the return statement to return the random number directly. In the second print statement, you put the call to get the random number into the string template. You can get rid of the dice roll variable by doing the same thing in the first print statement. Call my first dice.roll in the string template and delete the dice roll variable. The first two lines of your main code now look like this. Value my first dice is equal to dice and the random number, the sides of dice is 6, and then print your dice number and sided dice roll is now your code, and there should be no difference in the output. Now this is your final code after refactoring it. So we have refactored our code to make it look more appealing. And we will get the same output as our previous code. So this is our solution code and summary. So we have called the random function and on an int range to generate a random number from 1 through 6 using 1 through 6 dot random. Classes are like blueprint of an object. They can have properties and behaviors implemented as variables and functions. An instance of a class represents an object, often a physical object such as a die. You can call the action on the object and change the attribute. You can supply values to a class when you create an instance. For example, class dice val num sides int, and then create an instance with dice 6. A function can return something, specify the data type to be returned in the function definition, and use a return statement in the function body to return something. So this is the classes and instances in Kotlin. Now, in the rest of these parts, we will learn how to create an interactive dice roller app, add conditional behavior in Kotlin, add images to the dice roller app, and write unit tests, intro to debugging, and what can you build with these basics. And then will be a project laminate. And here you can go and take the quiz on what you have learned for so far. So I will just show you how to do it. So which of the following is an example of a class? A car class that has a make and model and that can be driven. A flower class that has a scent. A puppy class that has a breed, weight and age and that can bark. A shopping cart class that has a cart size and cart value and that can hold items. A song class that has lyrics. Now, which of the following is difference between a class and an instance? So you can think of a class as a blueprint, okay, and an instance of the actual as the actual thing. And a class is like a architectural plan for a bridge, and the Golden Gate Bridge as an instance of those plans. So you can create multiple instances from a class, but you can't create a classes from instance. Okay. Now next, for each of the following types of information, select whether it should be a part of a class or an instance. Information about properties shared by all things belonging to the class, such as number of sides, number of legs, or that it has a color. So, class. The specifics about a property, such as the specific color of a thing that can have a color. So it will be an instance. True or false? Yeah. Every main activity class in Android must have a main function. False. Now, which of the following is not a way for creating a comment in Kotlin? Is not a way for creating. Use to turn the rest of function to comment, and use this to comment. That is one line big long. Now, which of the following statements about a conditional statement is true? A conditional statement is a way for you to set up a condition and ensure that code following is only executed if that condition is met. And a conditional statement can be used within functions to return output based on condition defined in that function. The what is a good reason for you to add comments to your code? So to explain to yourself or others why the code is written in a certain way, yes. To structure code like chapter headings in books, yes. To point out some parts of the code that is very important, yes. To explain to other developer how to use your code for their own programs, yes. So all these are correct, so we will go with all of the verbs. Now, which of the following are Kotlin data types? So teacher and boolean and int range. Now the last one. Which of the following are valid keywords used in conditional statements in Kotlin? So we haven't been in here, but when you will complete the parts, you will get the answer. So for now, we will just go with if well then when. So after submitting the answer, you will get a badge, and see, then you can return to pathway. Hmm. So this was our unit 1 pathway number 4. Now let's begin with unit 2. So unit 2 is based on layouts. We will build two different apps and improve the user interface of your app by learning about layouts, material design guidelines, and best practice for UI development. In pathway there will be three pathways. In pathway 1, we will get user input in an app. So we will create a tip calculator app by building the layout first and then implementing the logic to calculate the tip from the user input. So welcome to unit 2.
Oh, hi. Welcome to Unit 2. I'm just at home right now, but if you're ready, I'll call Kat and Dan. 1 second. Hey, Dan. The students for Unit 2. Are you?
Sure. Let's do it. Let's call Kat in.
Oh, hi, Megan. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Kat. The students are ready for us.
Oh, perfect. I'm just putting the finishing touches on one of our apps right now. Great. We're building 2 apps this unit, so let's tell the students about them. Sure. So the first app you'll build is the tip calculator app, so you can thank someone for great service.
The second app is a daily affirmations app. We thought this would be a great way to help keep you inspired each day while learning how to program Android.
And if that weren't inspiring enough, you'll learn Kotlin language features like classes, inheritance, lists, and arrays. You'll also learn more practical tips for Android development.
So let's get cooking.
So this one is a tip calculator app introduction.
Back in Unit 1, you learned how to build an interactive app with a button, the Dice Roller app. But what if you want the user to be able to enter information into the app, like entering text into a text field or choosing a radio button option? In this first pathway of Unit 2, you'll learn how to build an app that does just that. Together, we'll build a tip calculator app that you can use to calculate how much to tip someone for great service. To use the app, enter in cost of service into the text field. Then decide how the service was. If you thought it was amazing, that will map to a 20% tip. You can even toggle this switch depending on whether or not you want to round up the tip to a flat amount. Finally, clicking on the Calculate button shows you the amounted tip. You'll be writing all the code to create this app. To do this, you'll need a good foundation in some core Kotlin programming concepts. That's why you'll first practice these new concepts in the Kotlin playground and then jump into Android Studio to build the app. By the time you're done, you'll know how to build an app that takes user input through editable text fields, radio buttons, and switches. These UI components are common among many apps. Next time you're using some of your favorite apps, I'm sure you'll be able to spot them. And soon enough, you'll know how to add this type of functionality into your own apps.
Okay, so guys, do you want me to continue this, or you will do it? It is mostly the self learn part. Do you want me to continue, or should I wrap up here? Okay, great. All right. So guys, that's for this session, and hope you learned a lot in this thing. So we will wrap up. Thank you guys for joining the session. You're welcome, Nilesh.